The 2nd of February, 1943, Stalingrad, the Soviet Union. The German Sixth Army, after 5 months of fierce fighting and heavy casualties, having exhausted their ammunition and food, finally capitulates, making it the first of Hitler's field armies to surrender during World War II. The battle for the city proves a decisive psychological turning point, ending a string of German victories in the summer of 1942 and beginning the long retreat westward. The Soviet army remains on the offensive, and in July 1944 liberates Majdanek, the first major Nazi camp to be liberated, which is located in German-occupied Poland. Soviet officials invite journalists to inspect the camp and to see the evidence of the horrors that had occurred there. Only after the liberation of the concentration camps, the full extent of Nazi horrors is finally exposed to the world. Because of the demands of forced labor and the lack of food, only a small percentage of concentration camp inmates survive. Compounded by months and years of mistreatment and torture, they resemble skeletons, and many of them are so weak that they can hardly move at all. One of the most infamous perpetrators of the criminal Nazi regime responsible for these atrocities is Ewa Paradies. Eva Paradis was born on the 17th of December, 1920, in Lauenburg, then part of the Weimar Republic, which was the name given to the German government from 1918 to 1933. Eva, a daughter of Protestant parents, was only 12 when Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party came into power in January 1933. Soon after their assumption of power, Nazi leaders began to make good on their pledge to persecute German Jews. During the first 6 years of Hitler's dictatorship, from 1933 until the outbreak of war in 1939, Jews felt the effects of more than 400 decrees and regulations that restricted all aspects of their public and private lives. Many of those laws were national ones that had been issued by the German administration and affected all Jews. But state, regional, and municipal officials, on their own initiative, also promulgated a barrage of exclusionary decrees in their own communities. Thus, hundreds of individuals in all levels of government throughout the country were involved in the persecution of Jews as they conceived, discussed, drafted, adopted, enforced, and supported anti-Jewish legislation. No corner of Germany was left untouched. Nazi propaganda played an integral role in advancing the persecution and ultimately the destruction of Europe's Jews. It created an atmosphere tolerant of violence against Jews and also encouraged passivity and acceptance of the impending measures against them, as these appear to depict the Nazi government as stepping in and restoring order. Schools, too, played an important role in spreading Nazi ideas to the German youth. From their first days at school, German children such as Eva Paradies were imbued with a cult of Adolf Hitler, and his portrait was a standard fixture in all classrooms. While Sense has removed some books from the classroom, the German educators introduced new textbooks that taught students love for Hitler, obedience to state authority, militarism, racism, and anti-Semitism. Eva Paradis was 14 when she left school. As Nazi leaders prepared for war in Europe, anti-Semitic legislation in Germany and Austria paved the way for more radical persecution of Jews. When the Second World War began, on the 1st of September 1939, Eva Paradis was working as a tram conductor. The same month, the Germans established the Stutthof Camp in the wooded area west of Stutthof, a town about 22 miles east of Danzig, today's Gdańsk. The original camp, known as the Old Camp, was surrounded by barbed wire fences and 8 barracks for the inmates built by prisoners in 1940. The camp was established in connection with the ethnic cleansing project that included the liquidation of Polish elites such as members of the intelligentsia, as well as religious and political leaders. Even before the war, the Germans had created lists of people to be arrested, and the Nazi authorities were secretly reviewing suitable places to set up concentration camps in their area. Originally, Stutthof was a civilian internment camp under the Danzig police chief before its subsequent massive expansion. In November 1941, it became a labor education camp for political prisoners and persons accused of violating labor discipline, administered by the SD, the German security police. Finally, in January 1942, the Stutthof camp became a regular concentration camp under the jurisdiction of the SS. In 1943, the camp was enlarged and a new camp was constructed alongside the earlier one. It contained 30 new barracks and was surrounded by electrified barbed wire fences. A crematorium and gas chamber were added in 1943, just in time to start mass executions when Stutthof was included in the final solution in June 1944. The maximum capacity of the gas chamber was 150 people per execution. Eventually, the Stutthof camp system became a vast network of forced labor camps. 105 Stutthof subcamps were established throughout northern and central German-occupied Poland. Tens of thousands of people, perhaps as many as 100,000, were deported to Stutthof camp. The prisoners were mainly non-Jewish Poles. Conditions in the camp were brutal. Many prisoners died in typhus epidemics that swept the camp in the winter of 1942 and again in 1944. Those whom the SS guards judged too weak or sick to work were gassed in the gas chamber. Gassing with Zyklon B gas began in June 1944, and 4,000 prisoners, including Jewish women and children, were killed in a gas chamber before the evacuation of the camp. Camp doctors also killed sick or injured prisoners in the infirmary with lethal injections of phenol. More than 60,000 people died in Stutthof Concentration Camp and in subcamps. Until 1942, nearly all of the prisoners were Polish. The number of inmates increased considerably in 1944, with Jews forming a significant proportion of the newcomers. The first contingent of 2,500 Jewish prisoners arrived from Auschwitz in July 1944. In total, 23,566 Jews, including 21,817 women, were transferred to Stutthof from Auschwitz. The camp staff consisted of SS guards and, after 1943, Ukrainian auxiliaries. In June 1944, the SS in Stutthof began conscripting women from Danzig and the surrounding cities to train as camp guards because of their severe shortage after the women's subcamp of Stutthof called Bromberg-Ost was set up in the city of Bydgoszcz. One such woman became Eva Paradis, who at that time worked as a tram conductor. From August 1944, Paradis was trained as an SS concentration camp guard at the Stutthof Concentration Camp. In October 1944, she was ordered to the Bromberg-Ost subcamp, and in January 1945, back to the main Stutthof camp. In both camps, Paradis became infamous for her brutal treatment of prisoners. One Stutthof survivor later testified, "In the freezing cold winter, Eva Paradis often ordered a group of female prisoners to undress and stand in the snow. Then she poured cold water on the naked women, and when they moved, she would beat them." Another prisoner testified that when she was in a particularly bad mood, Paradis would club the female prisoners to death. She would also beat and kick the women without any reason at all until they lay still. The evacuation of prisoners from the Stutthof camp system in northern Poland began in January 1945. When the final evacuation began, there were nearly 50,000 prisoners in the Stutthof camp system, the overwhelming majority of them Jews. About 5,000 prisoners from the Stutthof subcamps were marched to the Baltic Sea coast, forced into the water, and machine-gunned. The rest of the prisoners were marched in the direction of Lauenburg, Stutthof subcamp in East Germany, but after they were cut off by advancing Soviet forces, the Germans forced the surviving prisoners back to Stutthof. Marching in severe winter conditions and treated brutally by the SS guards, thousands died during the death march. In April 1945, Eva Paradis accompanied one of the last transports of female prisoners from Stutthof to its subcamp Lauenburg. After the war, witnesses testified that those women who could not march anymore, Paradis murdered. In late April 1945, the remaining prisoners were removed from Stutthof by sea, since Stutthof was completely encircled by Soviet forces. Again, hundreds of prisoners were forced into the sea and shot. It has been estimated that over 25,000 prisoners, 1 in 2, died during the evacuation from Stutthof and its subcamps. When Soviet forces liberated Stutthof on the 9th of May, 1945, they found only 100 prisoners who had managed to hide during the final evacuation of the camp. Altogether, some 100,000 prisoners passed through Stutthof, 60,000 of them perished, while another 22,000 of them were transferred to other concentration camps. Though towards the end of the war, Paradis fled, she was discovered and captured by Polish officers in Lauenburg in May 1945. Paradis was then tried at the First Stutthof Trial, which began on the 25th of April, 1946. Several Holocaust survivors testified about her cruelty and the murders she had committed in Stutthof during the war. She and her female Nazi comrades all pleaded not guilty to the general charge of war crimes, and Paradis and the other accused women did not seem to take the trial seriously. They were said to have behaved insolently, giggling, and joking during the proceedings. The trial ended on the 31st of May. Eva Paradis, for her sadistic abuse and killing of prisoners, was sentenced to death by hanging. She cried as the verdict was announced. Her execution was held publicly and became a theatre of horror, which was recorded by official press photographers. After World War II, only 3 public executions of war criminals were carried out in Poland. One of them took place at Biskupia Górka Hill near Gdańsk, former Danzig. When on the 4th of July, 1946, 11 Nazi criminals from the Stutthof Concentration Camp, including 25-year-old Eva Paradis, were hanged from the gallows, 200,000 people were watching. On that day, Biskupia Górka Hill experienced a real siege. 3 days earlier, the newspapers had reported the date of the execution, and workplaces announced a day off and provided employees with transport to the event. Everyone could come to witness the execution. The security forces feared that a lynching might occur at any moment, and the militia and army had difficulty controlling the huge crowd. The 4th of July was very warm. The sun was shining. Punctually at 5 p.m., 11 open trucks brought the prisoners to the execution ground, their hands and legs tied with cords. On the platform of each of the 11 trucks stood a convict, 6 men, and 5 women in total. The trucks were backed under the gallows, and the condemned made to stand on the tailboards or on the chairs on which they had been sitting. Former Stutthof prisoners, dressed in striped uniforms, volunteered to serve as executioners and put a simple cord noose around the convicts' necks. The execution was planned in such a way that after each truck would be driven forward, the 11 convicts would be left suspended, and their bodies would not fall from too great a height. As a result, the nooses did not break their necks and did not cause an instant death. This short drop method of hanging resulted in a torturous death by strangulation of each of the criminals, lasting anywhere from 10 to 20 long minutes. When the driver of the first truck carrying Johann Pauls, former commandant of the guards in Stutthof, started the engine and moved slowly forward, Pauls, before sliding off the platform and hanging on the rope, managed to shout "Heil Hitler." He was answered by the insults of the crowd. As Pauls' body went still, another truck started moving, and another criminal began what those present at the execution described as a rope dance. As each truck moved forward, the other convicts had the opportunity to take a good look at what awaited them in the next few moments. When one truck driver failed to start the engine several times, the former Stutthof prisoner pushed the convict off the platform. The crowd waved, and the people shouted, "For our husbands, for our children." Eva Paradis was the last convict to die. The security forces then allowed the crowd to the gallows. People ripped off buttons, cut off pieces of fabric, and kicked and smashed the corpses. The gathered people were then chased away, and the bodies were removed from the gallows. They were then taken to the Medical University of Gdańsk to be used as a teaching aid in anatomy classes. There were no tears shed for Eva Paradis. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.